I didn't plan to become the kind of man who counts the hours between phone calls. But that winter I did. It started on a Thursday night in late November. The kind of cold that crawls under your coat and settles into your bones. I remember because the heater in my truck had been broken for 3 days, and every breath I took looked like smoke. My name's Daniel Mercer. I was 39 at the time, living outside a town in western Pennsylvania that most people drive through without noticing. 2 gas stations, a diner that never closes, and a river that always looks darker than it should. I worked nights hauling freight between warehouses. Nothing glamorous. Pallets of cleaning supplies, boxes of auto parts, sometimes produce. The job was quiet, and I like quiet. When you drive long enough at night, the world shrinks. Headlights, asphalt, radio static. That's about it. I had gotten used to it. What I hadn't gotten used to was the silence at home. My wife, Laura, had died 3 years earlier. Lung cancer. She'd never smoked a day in her life. Doctors called it bad luck, which is a phrase I've grown to hate. After she passed, the house felt wrong. Not empty exactly. More like it had shifted an inch off its foundation. I kept living there because moving would have meant admitting something was over. And I wasn't ready for that. So most nights, after finishing a run, I'd sit in the truck outside the house for a few minutes before going inside, just letting the engine idle, listening to it tick. The first call came while I was doing exactly that. 10:42 p.m. I remember the time because I had just turned off the engine and the dashboard lights were fading out. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Unknown number. Normally I ignore those. Everyone does. Telemarketers, scams, wrong numbers. But something made me pick it up. Hello. For a moment, there was nothing. Then breathing. Not loud. Just there. Someone on the other end of the line. Hello. I said again. Another pause. Then a man's voice. Low. Calm. Daniel Mercer. The way he said my name made the back of my neck tighten. Yeah. I said slowly. Who's this? Silence again. Then the man said something strange. You're sitting in your truck. I didn't answer right away. Because he wasn't guessing. You just got home from a run, he continued. You're parked in front of the house, but you haven't gone inside yet. I felt my chest tighten. Who is this? Another pause. Then he said, almost gently, you shouldn't go inside tonight. Now I was angry. You got about 5 seconds before I hang up, I said. The man exhaled softly. I'm serious, Daniel. My eyes moved automatically toward the house. The porch light was on, same as always. Kitchen window glowing warm. Nothing unusual. Listen, I said, my voice hardening. If this is some kind of joke. It isn't. Then he added something that froze the words in my throat. The back door is unlocked. I hadn't told anyone that. Not a neighbor. Not a friend. It had been sticking lately. Sometimes the latch didn't catch unless he slammed it. I turned slowly in my seat and looked toward the dark line of trees behind the house. You watching me? I asked. No. Then how the hell? Because someone else is. For a moment, the only sound was the wind moving through dry leaves. My fingers tightened around the phone. What are you talking about? The man's voice lowered slightly. There's a man behind your house right now. Something heavy dropped into my stomach. I looked again toward the trees. Everything was black back there. The river was maybe 50 yards beyond the tree line. No houses. No streetlights. Just woods. You expect me to believe that? I said. I expect you to stay in the truck. The calm in his voice was the part one didn't like. Not panic. Not urgency. Just certainty. Who are you? I asked again. Another pause. Then he said, I'm the reason you're still alive. I laughed once, short and sharp. Yeah? Then start explaining. The man ignored that. Daniel, he said quietly, how long have you been sitting there tonight? I checked the dashboard clock out of habit before remembering it had already gone dark. 5 minutes maybe. That's good. What? Because he's only been there for 3. My heart started beating harder. I scanned the trees again. Still nothing. You're messing with me, I said, but my voice didn't sound as confident as I wanted. I'm really not. Then tell me how you know all this. Another breath on the line. Then the man said something that made my hands go cold. Because I've been watching your house for 6 days. The words sat there between us. Heavy. What? I asked. For the same reason he has. And what reason is that? The man hesitated. Just for a second. But I heard it. To see if you'd notice. Notice what? Silence. Then the man said quietly. The pattern. I rubbed a hand over my face. This was insane. A stranger calling me in the middle of the night, talking about patterns and people in the woods. All right, I said slowly. Let's pretend for a second I believe you. Good. Why me? That question seemed to hang longer than the others. When he finally answered, his voice sounded different. Not scared, but careful. Daniel, he said, 3 weeks ago you delivered a pallet to Warehouse 14 in Pittsburgh. My stomach tightened. Because he was right. I'd done that run twice that month. How do you know that? You remember the crate that wasn't on the manifest? I sat up straighter. Every trucker knows manifests. They're the law of the load. Weight, contents, destination. Everything accounted for. Except that night. There had been one crate that didn't match. No barcode. No paperwork. Just a plain wooden box already sitting on the loading dock. The supervisor told me to take it anyway. Just drop it with the rest, he'd said. At the time I hadn't thought much about it. Freight companies cut corners all the time. But hearing this stranger mention, it made something tighten in my chest. Yeah, I said slowly. I remember. You weren't supposed to. What does that mean? It means you looked at it. I frowned. I look at everything I load. Not like that. A cold feeling crept up my spine. Because suddenly I remembered something. The crate had a crack in one corner. Not big, but enough that I could see darkness inside. And something else. A smell. Metallic. Like old pennies. I hadn't opened it, but I had leaned closer. Just for a second. How do you know that? I asked. The man didn't answer. Instead, he said something that made the inside of the truck feel 10 degrees colder. Daniel, the man behind your house right now. My throat felt dry. Yeah. He's not there to rob you. I swallowed. Then what? Another long breath through the phone. He's there to make sure you never talk about that crate. The words landed like a stone in my chest. That's crazy. I wish it was. I looked toward the house again. Everything still looked normal. Porch light. Curtains. Quiet. You said you've been watching for 6 days. I said. Yes. So why call tonight? The man didn't hesitate this time. Because tonight is the first time he showed up with a shovel. The air seemed to leave the truck. A shovel. Yes. I stared into the dark tree line, trying to see movement. Anything. Where exactly is he? I asked. About 20 yards behind your shed. My pulse was loud in my ears now. You see him right now? Yes. Then where are you? Another pause. Then the man said softly, close enough. And that's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. If he could see the man behind my house, and he could see my truck, then he wasn't watching from far away. He was somewhere nearby, in the dark, watching both of us. I gripped the phone tighter. Listen carefully, the man said. You have 2 choices tonight. I didn't answer. My eyes were locked on the tree line, waiting. What choices? I asked. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. You can stay exactly where you are. A long pause. Or you can go inside the house and find out what he buried under your floor 3 days ago. And that's when I heard something behind the house. A dull sound. Metal hitting dirt. For a second, I honestly thought the sound came from inside my own head. A dull metallic strike. Then another. Somewhere behind the house. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just steady enough to make my blood turn cold. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I just sat there gripping the phone, so hard my knuckles hurt. You hear it now, the man said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I whispered. On the other end of the line, he stayed quiet for a second, like he was listening too. Then he said, good. That means he's not coming toward the truck yet. Yet, my voice cracked harder than I wanted. Daniel, listen to me carefully. Don't turn on the headlights. Don't honk. Don't get out. I kept staring at the black shape of the trees beyond the shed. I couldn't see anything. My porch light didn't reach that far, and the moon was little more than a smear behind heavy clouds. What did you mean? I said. About something under my floor. The man exhaled slowly. It means exactly what I said. Who put it there? I don't know for sure. That's not good enough. It's what I've got. The metal struck dirt again. A slow scrape followed. He really was digging. Or burying. Or maybe uncovering. I didn't know which one scared me more. You got to tell me who you are, I said. Not yet. You already know my name, where I work, where I live, what I hauled, what happened behind my house 3 days ago. And you think not yet is still an acceptable answer? No, he said calmly. I think it's the only answer keeping you alive. I shut my eyes for half a second and forced myself to think. There were a few obvious facts. 1. Somebody was behind my house. 2. The stranger on the phone knew details he shouldn't know. 3. Whatever this was, It had started before tonight. 3 weeks ago. Maybe earlier. And 4. If he wanted me dead right now. I was in the easiest place in the world to kill. Parked in my own driveway, boxed in by a dead engine and my own disbelief. What do? I asked. Start the truck. I looked at the keys hanging from the ignition. That's going to light up the dash. Do it anyway. You said don't use the headlights. I did. Start the engine. Keep the lights off. The digging sound stopped. My chest went tight. Why did he stop? I whispered. Because he heard your voice. I froze. I hadn't realized how loud I'd been talking. In the stillness of the driveway, with the windows cracked from the broken heater, maybe my voice had carried farther than I thought. Start the truck, Daniel. Now. I turned the key. The engine coughed once, then caught. The dash lit up blue and white, throwing weak light across my hands. At the same time, something moved at the edge of the tree line. Not a full shape, just a shift. A darker shadow inside the dark. There, I said. I see him. My throat tightened. What does he look like? Tall. Coat. Cap. He's carrying something in his left hand. The shovel. Yes. My mouth had gone dry. What now? Put the truck in reverse. I did it. The rearview camera was useless, just grainy static and the edge of my own bumper. Back out slow, the man said. Don't spin gravel. I eased off the brake. The truck rolled back inch by inch. The shadow near the shed didn't move. Or maybe it did, and I just couldn't tell. Keep going, the voice said. Turn right at the road. Head toward town. What about the house? Leave it. There's something under my floor. Yes. And you want me to drive away from it? I want you alive long enough to dig it up. I backed into the road, straightened out, and shifted into drive. The tires hummed softly over cracked pavement. I kept waiting for something, for a figure to step into the road, for a gunshot, for the rear window to explode. Nothing happened. The house slid away behind me. Porch lights shrinking. Kitchen window dimming. Then it was gone. I drove with one hand on the wheel and the other locked around the phone. Where am I going? The diner on Route 17. Marlowe's. Open all night. Bad coffee, decent pie. The kind of place where nobody asks questions unless blood is visible. You there now? I asked. No. Then how do you know where to send me? It's public, Daniel. I know your habits. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because there wasn't much else to do. My habits. You stop there 2 or 3 times a week after late runs. I said nothing. Because he was right about that too. I'd started going after Laura died. There was something about the fluorescent lights and chipped mugs and low voices at 2 a.m. that felt easier than sitting alone in the house. You know a lot for a stranger, I said. He was quiet a moment. Then, I know what I was told to know. That got my attention. Told by who? No answer. Who told you? Keep driving. The trees thinned as I hit the main road. The river flashed, dark to my left. The truck heater pushed out air that was barely warmer than outside, but I still turned it on full blast just to hear something besides my own breathing. The man stayed on the line. I could hear almost nothing from his side. No traffic. No wind. No footsteps. Just the occasional breath. You said someone buried something under my floor 3 days ago. I said after a minute. Yes. How would they even get in? The same way everyone gets into a house they've studied. Quietly. That doesn't answer the question. Back door. Around 3:12 a.m. You weren't home. A cold pressure spread through my chest. 3 nights ago, I'd taken an extra run, covered for a guy named Morales whose kid had a fever. I hadn't gotten back until nearly sunrise. You watched them do it. I watched someone enter. I didn't see what they carried in. You called the cops. No. I almost slammed the brakes from sheer frustration. Why not? Because whoever is involved in this expected that. That doesn't make any sense. It will. No, it won't. Right now, it sounds like the kind of thing crazy people say before they get someone killed. The line stayed quiet. Then he said, "That's fair." Something about that answer knocked the anger slightly off balance. Not because I trusted him. Because he sounded like a man who was used to being distrusted and didn't blame anybody for it. I drove another mile before I asked the question that had been sitting in my throat since the first call. Are you one of them? The answer came quickly. No. That doesn't mean much. It's the truth. You part of whatever was in that crate. Silence. Were you? I asked again. He let out a breath. Indirectly. I tightened my grip on the wheel. Define indirectly. I wasn't supposed to touch the shipment. I wasn't supposed to know the route. I wasn't supposed to know your name. But you do. Yes. And now somebody's digging behind my house because I saw a cracked box I didn't even open. No, he said, and for the first time there was a hard edge in his voice. They're behind your house because you were noticed. I frowned. What's the difference? The difference is that opening the crate wouldn't have mattered as much as the fact that you looked at it like it mattered. That sentence sat with me a second, then another, and I hated that some part of me understood it. People who move illegal things for a living, they notice curiosity. They notice hesitation. They notice memory. I thought back to that loading dock in Pittsburgh. Warehouse 14. The supervisor had been jumpy that night. Not nervous exactly. Alert. Too alert. One of those men who keeps checking a door even after it's closed. The crate had been plain except for one faint marking burned into the wood near the bottom corner. Not a company label. Not a shipping code. A symbol. At the time I thought it looked like a bent nail inside a circle. I hadn't thought about it again until that moment in the truck. Then it came back clear as day. There was a mark on the box, I said. The line went dead quiet. What kind of mark, he asked. So he hadn't known everything. That fact gave me a strange, thin thread of control. Why? Because if it's the mark I think it is, then this is worse than I thought. I kept my eyes on the road. It was a circle, maybe, with something through it. I paused, try and picture it. Like a crooked line, almost like a hook. No response. You still there? Yes. His voice had changed again. Lower now. Tighter. Daniel, when you get to the diner, do not go inside right away. Why not? Because if they followed you from the house, they'll want to see whether you think you're safe around other people. I swallowed. You think I'm being followed? I think you should act like you are. The sign for Marlowe's appeared ahead, buzzing red in the dark. Open 24 hours. One of the letters in hours was burnout, same as it had been for years. The parking lot held 3 cars, a delivery van, and a snowplow with rust around the wheel wells. I pulled in but stayed near the edge under a dead lamp. Okay, I said. I'm here. Good. Kill the engine. I did. Now, check your mirrors. I looked left. Empty row of parking spaces, wet pavement, highway beyond. Right. Dumpster enclosure. Patchy snow. No movement. Rear view. Headlights on the road, but they kept going. I don't see anybody. That doesn't mean much. I'm starting to understand that. For the first time, I heard something like a humorless smile in his voice. Yeah. I sat there staring at the diner windows. Inside, I could see June behind the counter, pouring coffee for a man in a flannel jacket. Same old world. Same old routine. A place where men complained about weather and overtime and bad knees. And somehow, 40 feet away, my life no longer belonged to that world. What exactly was in the crate? I asked. I don't know. Bull. I know what people were willing to do for it. That's not the same thing. It's close enough. No, I said. It isn't. My pulse was starting to settle into something colder now. Not calm. Just focus. The kind that shows up when fear gets tired and leaves the job to instinct. You said somebody put something in my house. Fine. You said there's a man with a shovel behind my shed. Fine. You said I was noticed. Fine. But here's the problem. I still don't know whether I'm talking to the man trying to save me or the man moving me into position. He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quieter than before. You're right. I blinked. That wasn't the response I expected. I don't have a reason to trust you, I said. No. So give me one. Another pause. Then he said, Laura kept her recipes in the second kitchen drawer, under the takeout menus. Every muscle in my body locked up. My hand slipped on the steering wheel. How do you know that? I told you. I've been watching the house. That's not enough. Yes, it is. No, it's not. I snapped. Not unless you've been inside. Silence. And then I knew. A different kind of cold moved through me. Not fear this time. Violation. You were in my house. I had to be. I saw Laura in my head all at once. Standing at the counter barefoot, hair tied up, laughing because she never followed her own recipe cards anyway. Her handwriting on index cards with grease stains at the corners. The second drawer that always stuck in humid weather. A stranger had been in that kitchen. Maybe more than once. I spoke through clenched teeth. What? To confirm whether they had already planted it. My vision had narrowed. You went through my wife's things. No. I checked the crawl space access under the pantry. I stared straight ahead at the diner windows, but all I could see was my own kitchen. The pantry door. The loose board near the molding. The The place Laura always complained collected dust. There's no crawl space access in the pantry, I said automatically. There's if you know where to press. My heart thudded once hard. Because that was true. The access panel was hidden under a false board my father had put in when I was a kid. Old houses around the river had strange fixes like that. I hadn't thought about it in years. I had never told anyone. Not even Laura. What is it? I asked, barely above a whisper. I couldn't get it out. What is it? It's wrapped in black plastic. About the size of a shoebox. My mouth went dry again. A bomb. I don't think so. You don't think so? No wires. No timer. No obvious trigger. Then what? That's the problem. I don't know. I leaned back against the seat and shut my eyes. The truck smelled like coal vinyl and diesel. My whole life had narrowed into fragments. A crate in Pittsburgh. A man with a shovel. A hidden package under my floor. A stranger who knew about Laura's recipe drawer. And somewhere in all of it was the point where I'd stopped being a truck driver with a dead wife and a broken heater and become a man being moved around by forces he couldn't see. What happens if I go to the police right now? I asked. You might live. Might. You might also hand them exactly what whoever planted it wants recovered. So you think the police are compromised? I think panic makes people predictable. That wasn't an answer either, but I was too tired to fight every sentence. What do you want me to do? I want you to go inside, order coffee, sit where you can see the parking lot, and wait 7 minutes. For what? For me. I turned my head sharply toward the phone. No. You asked for a reason to trust me. This is it. You expect me to meet you? Yes. In person? Yes. At 2 a.m. in a diner parking lot after telling me someone may have buried something under my house, and another guy was outside with a shovel? Yes. I laughed once, but there was nothing alive in it. You hear how that sounds? Every second of the day. I looked through the windshield again. Inside Marlowe's, June wiped down the counter with the same slow circles she'd been making for 15 years. Normal life. Still going. Still lit. Still warm. I missed it already. What if you don't show? I asked. I will. And if the man from my house does? He won't come into the diner. You sound pretty certain. I know the type. That sentence bothered me more than I wanted it to. Not because of what it said. Because of how personal it sounded. I checked the clock on the dash. 11:07 p.m. 7 minutes. A stupid amount of time to bet your life on. But then again, everything tonight had become stupid the moment I answered an unknown number. I reached for the door handle. Daniel, the man said before I opened it. I stopped. When you go in, don't sit with your back to the door. I stared through the windshield. Why? Because the first line men tell themselves is that danger looks dangerous. I waited. Then he added, most of the time, it just looks tired. The line went dead. I pulled the phone away and stared at the screen. Call ended. No number. No name. Nothing to grab onto. Just my own reflection looking older than it had an hour ago. I sat there another 10 seconds. Then I got out of the truck and headed for the diner. The cold hit hard enough to make my eyes water. Gravel crunched under my boots. I kept waiting to hear footsteps behind me, or a voice, or the scrape of metal. But the parking lot stayed still. Inside, the bell over the door gave its usual weak jingle. Heat wrapped around me immediately, thick with coffee, bacon grease, and old fry oil. June looked up from behind the counter. She was in her 60s, hard-faced in a way that came from raising 3 boys and serving drunks for 40 years. She'd seen every kind of tire man there was, and she treated them all like weather. Danny, she said, you look like hell. Thanks. She poured coffee into a mug before I even sat down. I took the booth by the window, angled so I could see both the parking lot and the front door. Just like he told me. June brought the coffee over and set it down. You want pie? No. She narrowed her eyes. That bad, huh? I managed a faint nod. She didn't push. That was one of the reasons people loved her. The coffee was hot enough to hurt. I drank it anyway. Minute 1 felt like 10. A man in a Carhartt jacket paid his bill and left. A kid in a delivery uniform came in, grabbed a takeout bag, and went back out. June changed the filter on a coffee machine. The neon sign buzzed. Everything ordinary. Everything wrong. By minute 4, I started thinking I'd been played. By minute 5, I started thinking maybe the man wanted me out of the house so someone else could go back in. By minute 6, I noticed something I should have seen immediately. Across the lot, past the snowplow, parked under the dark lamp I'd ignored on the way in, there was a gray sedan. Engine off. No lights. and someone sitting in the driver's seat. I couldn't make out a face, just a shape. Still, watching the diner. My hand tightened around the coffee mug. The bell over the door rang. I looked up. A man stepped inside wearing a dark canvas jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. Mid-40s maybe. Lean, clean-shaven. Not tall enough to be the shadow I'd imagine behind my shed, but not small either. He paused just inside the entrance, scanned the room once, and his eyes found me immediately. No hesitation, like he'd known exactly where I'd be sitting. Then he walked over, stopped at my booth, and said the last thing in the world I expected. "Don't look at the parking lot again." I stared at him. He slid into the seat across from me and kept his voice low. "The man in the gray sedan isn't with me." Then he lifted one hand under the table, just enough for me to see the dirt ground deep into his knuckles and the fresh blood along his sleeve, and said, "Also, I think I killed the one behind your house." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. Not because the diner was loud. It wasn't. It was all spoon clinks and coffee steam and the hum of an old refrigerator somewhere in back. I thought I'd misheard him because a sentence like that doesn't belong in a booth at Marlowe's between a sugar dispenser and a chipped napkin holder. But he didn't repeat himself. He just sat there, one hand under the table, the other resting near his coffee-stained sleeve, breathing like a man who had been running on borrowed oxygen for too long. I looked at the blood first. Dark against the canvas. Not soaked through, but enough. Then at his face. Nothing remarkable about it. That bothered me. Men you remember right away are easier to defend against. This guy looked like half the tired men who passed through town. Sharp cheekbones, rough skin, eyes that hadn't slept enough in years. "What did you say?" I asked. His eyes flicked to the window, then back to me. I said, "Don't look at the parking lot again." "No, the other part." He held my gaze. "I think I killed the man behind your house." June called from behind the counter. "You want anything, hon?" He didn't even turn around. "Coffee." She nodded and kept moving. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, the correction, the explanation that made the sentence human again. None came. "You think?" I said. "It was dark." "That's your explanation?" "It's the one I have." My heart was beating hard again, but differently now. Before, fear had felt distant, spread out over woods and darkness and unanswered questions. Now it was sitting across from me, in a booth, asking for coffee. "You expect me to believe you?" I said. "No," he replied. "I expect you to listen faster than you judge." That irritated me enough to cut through some of the fear. "I don't know your name." "Elias." "Real name?" He gave one small shrug. "Real enough." June arrived with a mug and poured for him. Her eyes lingered on the blood near his cuff. "You all right there?" He looked at the stain like he'd forgotten it was visible. "Caught myself on barbed wire." June had heard worse lies from better men. She just nodded once and walked away. When she was gone, I leaned forward. "Start over. There isn't time. Then make time." His jaw tightened. He glanced once toward the counter, making sure June was out of earshot. "The gray sedan outside arrived 2 minutes before I came in," he said. "Single driver. Male. Been sitting still since you entered. You know that without looking." I looked before I came inside. "You said don't look at him again." I said don't make it obvious. I pushed my coffee aside. "You tracked me from the house?" "Yes." "And the man with the shovel?" "Yes." "You killed him?" I said I think I did. Something in me snapped a little then. Too many half answers. Too much calm. I kept my voice low, but it came out hard. "You've had me jumping at shadows for an hour. You've been in my house. You know things about my wife, my job, my routines. And now you walk in here bleeding and tell me there's a car outside and maybe a dead man in my yard. So here's what happens next. You either tell me exactly what this is, or I stand up, I tell June to call 911, and you can explain the rest to somebody with a badge." Elias sat back and looked at me for a long second. Not angry, not scared, just measuring. Then he nodded once, as if I'd finally become useful. 3 months ago, he said, a private storage unit outside Cleveland was emptied 2 days before a federal seizure order got served. I frowned. What does that have to do with me? It was supposed to contain ledgers, cash, and a drive. Only the drive mattered. He wrapped his hand around a coffee mug, but didn't drink. The drive disappeared before the seizure team got there. Since then, a few people have been looking for it. Criminals. Yes. Law enforcement. A pause. Yes. Which are you? He almost smiled at that, but there was nothing warm in it. That depends who's asking. That's not an answer. No, he said. It's an honest limitation. I stared at him. He continued. The crate you transported out of Warehouse 14 was believed to contain the drive, or something tied to it. Nobody on the outside knew for certain. It was moved through normal freight because that's what works best. Ordinary routes, ordinary men, ordinary paperwork. Except the paperwork wasn't ordinary. Correct. So someone used me to move this thing. Yes, and now they think I know where it went. Elias shook his head. No, worse. They think you noticed something you weren't meant to notice. I rubbed a hand over my mouth. That symbol on the crate means what? He looked down at the table for the first time. It marks internal custody. Meaning that once a shipment carries that mark, everybody touching it is being measured. I felt my stomach turn. Measure how? For loyalty, curiosity, risk. I'll let that settle. All those night runs. All those loading docks. All those men half paying attention while forklifts beeped and dock doors slammed. And somewhere inside that system, people were studying who glanced too long at the wrong box. That's insane, I said. Yes, but true. He met my eyes. Yes. I looked toward the window before catching myself and stopping short. You said somebody put something in my crawl space. Yes. What if that's a drive? It might be. Then why leave it in my house? Because hiding something in the home of a man who doesn't know he has it is smarter than storing it anywhere criminals expect. A bad thought came to me then. Or smarter than storing it anywhere law enforcement can officially admit to knowing about. His face didn't change, but the silence did. And that silence was answer enough. I leaned back slowly. You're not here off the books, I said. No, you're here because there are no books. Another one of those dry almost smiles. Closer. I felt sick. Not because I suddenly understood everything. I didn't. Because I understood enough. Enough to know there were men on both sides of the law, or somewhere in the rot between them, moving pieces around without paperwork, without accountability, without any plan that ended well for people like me. So I'm what? I asked quietly. A mailbox. For now. What happens when they come to collect? His answer came too quickly. They already did. He meant tonight. The shovel. The woods. My throat tightened. What was he doing back there? I think he came to confirm whether the package was still inside. And the shovel. Contingency. I didn't ask contingency for what. Some questions answer themselves. June passed by and topped off my coffee without interrupting. I thanked her automatically. My voice sounded normal. That scared me more than if it had shaken. Elias waited until she moved away. The man in the sedan is a different problem, he said. How do you know? Because the first man worked like a cleaner. Quiet. Patient. Solo. The sedan's been sitting in open view. That's surveillance, not recovery. I frowned. You can tell all that from a parked car. I can tell enough. I studied him. He really did look tired. Not dramatic movie tired. Real tired. Like a man whose body had been forcing itself forward for years after the mind started asking harder questions. What happened behind my house? I asked. He flexed his right hand, once beneath the table. He heard my approach before I reached the shed. You went after him? Yes. What? Because he was there. That's not a reason. It is in my line of work. I almost laughed again. You keep saying things like that as if they help. They help me. I stared at him until he finally gave me more. He moved toward the trees when he realized he wasn't alone. Elias said. I followed. He swung first. With the shovel. No. Knife. That made me glance again at the blood on his sleeve. He missed. Not entirely. You shoot him. Another pause. No. That surprised me. Then how? I used the shovel. The words landed flat and ugly between us. I looked down at my coffee, suddenly unable to meet his eyes. A few seconds passed before I said, You left a body behind my house. I left a man on the ground in the dark. Breathing or not, I can't promise. And now we're sitting here drinking coffee. No, he said quietly. You're drinking coffee. I'm figuring out whether we have 3 minutes or 30. That made me look up. Before what? Before the sedan outside decides whether to stay patient. Something shifted in my chest then. Not trust, exactly, but alignment. The kind that happens when fear gets replaced by a task. What do you need from me? Elias reached into the inside pocket of his jacket slowly, carefully, and pulled out a folded receipt. Not a gun. Not a badge. Just a receipt. He slid it across the table. On the back was an address written in block letters. I stared at it. An old county road about 15 miles north. Farmland. Abandoned properties. A church that burned down when I was 12. What is this? A place we can open the package. If I send you alone, you won't make it there. That reassuring tone of yours really carries. He ignored it. There's a storm cellar on the property. Concrete walls. No nearby neighbors. One entrance. One exit. How do you know it? I prepared it. For me. For whoever ended up holding the package. I looked up sharply. You knew this might happen. I knew something would. The bell over the diner door jingled. Every nerve in my body went hot. A man entered wearing a knit cap and heavy coat, stamping cold off his boots. Just a customer. He took a stool at the counter. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Elias watched me carefully. You're adapting, he said. Don't make it sound like a compliment. It isn't. I looked again at the address. Why not just go back to my house, get the package, and take it? Because if the sedan is with who I think it's with, they want us to move too soon. You don't know that. No, I infer it. Same difference. Not to people who survive for a living. I hated how steady he stayed. Hated more that part of me had started using his steadiness like a railing. You still haven't told me what's on the drive. Maybe names. Maybe payment records. Maybe leverage. Maybe enough to put very dangerous men in prison. Maybe enough to keep different dangerous men out. That clears it right up. He leaned in then, voice lower. Daniel, I'm going to say this once, and I need you to hear it cleanly. Whatever is in your house is valuable enough that people have already crossed state lines, broken chain of custody laws, and buried at least one body trying to control it. I stared at him, then at the coffee, then at the window I wasn't supposed to look at. Buried at least one body. He realized what he'd said a fraction too late. Not tonight's, I said. He didn't answer. That's what you meant, isn't it? His silence turned the air heavy. Elias. He rubbed a thumb across the edge of the mug. The man who lived in your house before you owned it. I frowned. Old man Hanley. Yes. He died in Florida. No, Elias said. That's what the county was told. I felt something hollow open inside me. The house had belonged to Mr. Hanley before me. Quiet widower. Lived alone. Sold it cheap after his health failed, according to the realtor. Moved south, supposedly. I'd signed papers, fixed the roof, married Laura there, buried her from there. What are you saying? I'm saying your house has been useful before. The diner suddenly felt too small, too bright, too ordinary for what was being said in it. You're telling me this now? I said. I didn't know for certain until tonight. How? Because the man behind your shed used a phrase before he pulled the knife. I waited. Elias's eyes stayed on mine. He said, not this house again. I felt the skin go cold at the back of my neck. Not this house again. Meaning the house had history. Meaning none of this started with me. Meaning maybe I hadn't just a bad luck. Maybe I had bought myself into something old and buried and patient. Laura, I said and stopped. He didn't rescue me from it. That made me finish. Did Laura know any of this? His answer came softly. I don't think so. You don't think so? Again with the uncertainty. Again with the space where certainty should have been. But this one mattered differently. Because for the first time that night, fear gave way to something worse. A thought I didn't want and couldn't stop. Had Laura really died from bad luck? Or had something reached into my life long before I noticed the crate? I stood up so fast the spoon in my mug rattled. June looked over. You okay, Danny? I forced a nod and sat back down. Elias kept his voice low. Don't do that again. I stared at him. You don't get to tell me how to react to my dead wife. His expression didn't change, but some of the hardness went out of it. You're right. I pressed my palms flat to the table and breathed slowly through my nose until my vision stopped narrowing. When I finally spoke, my voice sounded scraped raw. Say exactly what you know about Laura. Nothing operational. That's not what I asked. He hesitated, and that hesitation told me there was something. What do you know? Only that 2 months before she got sick, a sedan registered through a shell company was logged on your road 3 nights in a row. A sedan like the one outside? Maybe. And one of the names later connected to that shell company appears in a sealed personnel list tied to the Cleveland storage case. The table seemed to shift under my hands. That could mean nothing. Yes. But you don't believe that. No. I closed my eyes. Laura in the garden behind the shed. Laura coughing once in the kitchen and waving me off when I asked about it. Laura saying maybe we should move someday. Somewhere warmer, somewhere flatter, somewhere with fewer ghosts in the walls. I had laughed when she said ghosts. God help me, I had laughed. When I opened my eyes, Elias was watching the front windows. Not the parking lot directly, just the reflection in the glass. What? I asked. Your sedan just got company. Every muscle in my body went rigid. He kept watching the reflection. Black pickup. Slow approach. Didn't park. Rolled past. Kept going. Maybe nothing. Yes. But not likely. No. He drained his coffee in one swallow and set the mug down. We're out of time. I looked at the address again. Then at him. Then beyond him to June, wiping the same section of counter for the third time. The man in the knit cap, eating eggs. The delivery kid returning for another pickup. Small life. Safe life. The kind that goes on until it doesn't. If I walk out with you, I said, I'm choosing a side. Elias shook his head. No, you're accepting that a side already chose you. I hated that he was probably right. What's the plan? I asked. He nodded toward the kitchen hallway. Restroom window exits into the side alley. You checked. When I came in. Of course you did. We leave separately. You go through the restroom, cut behind the dumpster enclosure, and get into my vehicle. What vehicle? The blue pickup behind the propane cage. I didn't see a blue pickup. You weren't supposed to. That almost made sense. And you? I asked. I leave through the front. To draw them. To learn which of them is watching whom. That sounds like a good way to get shot. It's not my favorite. I slid out of the booth, then stopped. What if I just walk out and keep driving? Then one of three things happens, he said. The sedan follows you. The pickup follows you. Or neither does. And that's the worst one. Why? Because it means they already know where you'll end up. I stared at him for one more second. Then I asked the question that had been sitting there since he said her name. If this has anything to do with Laura. He met my eyes and didn't interrupt. I don't care who you work for. I don't care who you answer to. I want the truth. For the first time all night, his face showed something like fatigue mixed with guilt. I know, he said. That was the closest thing to a promise I was going to get. I turned and headed for the restroom. Every normal sound in the diner now felt fake. Forks. Coffee machine. June calling for a refill. The bell over the door. The old country song on the radio. I pushed into the men's room and locked the door behind me. The window above the sink was narrow, painted shut years ago and badly repaired. But the latch had been cut recently. Recently. Elias had prepared this. I stared at that latch for half a second too long. Then I shoved the window open. Cold air rushed in hard. Outside, the alley was dim and wet with thawing snow. Dumpster to the left. Brick wall to the right. No movement. I pulled myself through, boots scraping the sill, and dropped awkwardly into slush. The cold soaked through instantly. For 1 second I just crouched there listening. Nothing. Then, from the front parking lot, a sharp sound cracked through the night. Not a gunshot. A car door slamming hard. Voices followed. Low. Urgent. I moved. Past the dumpster. Past the propane cage. And then I saw it. A faded blue pickup tucked into the dark, so cleanly it looked like part of the shadows. Driver door already unlocked. I grabbed the handle and yanked it open. Nobody inside. Get in, a voice said from the darkness behind the cab. I spun so fast my shoulder hit the mirror. Elias stepped out from between the truck and the fence, breath white in the air, eyes fixed past me toward the diner lot. You said you were leaving through the front. I did. What changed? He looked at me once, brief and sharp. The man in the gray sedan wasn't watching the diner. He nodded toward the road beyond the alley. He was watching to see who came out the back. My mouth went dry. Before I could answer, headlights flared at the mouth of the alley. A gray sedan easing forward. Slow. Deliberate. Like it had known exactly where to wait. Elias shoved a key into my hand. Drive. What about you? He pulled a pistol from the back of his waistband like he had been hoping not to use it. I'll be right behind you, he said. And then, with his eyes still on the approaching sedan, he added the one sentence that made everything inside me stop cold. Daniel, whatever happens next, Do not let them open the package before you see what Laura left inside it.